The previous shirim of this week's parsha are from 3 years ago. There was a shir called Duke, and from 2 years ago there was a series of shirim on this week's parsha and various Pesach topics called the Israel Diaries. There's part 1, part 2, and part 3. They were recorded in Israel. Lots of nice footage there of Eretz Israel. And from last year there was a shir called I Have All That I Need and I Was Born to Do It. Right, so this week's shir is dedicated, as we just mentioned, in memory of the unspeakable tragedy which I really have no words for, that happened in Brooklyn. I'm sure we've heard about it, the 7 children that were killed in the fire. I don't think there's ever been a tragedy like this. To lose a child is one thing, but who can even begin to comprehend the pain that the father's going through? I believe the mother doesn't even know, because she's still either comatose or maybe they're just keeping it from her, how you can cope with such a tragedy. But I'll tell you how the Jewish people are dealing with this. I'll tell you 2 things that I know so far. Number 1, I heard today that some people in Golders Green, northwest London, are making a memorial event in their house. They're inviting Rabbanim, top Rabbanim, to give Hespedim, and their house, they're predicting their house is going to be absolutely chock-a-block with people, which I can imagine, because they have a big house, but still people want to come and they rally to these events. It's going to be recorded. Hopefully, B'ezrat Hashem, it will go up on learntorah.org, which is Rabbi Mansour's site, and people can see that. So that's one way we've reacted to this. Secondly, on Sunday there will be a meeting in one of the in 2 of the shuls in northwest London by Zaka. They're going to go and ask people to bring in their hot plates so they can check them, make sure everything is functioning properly, so that we can avert anything like this chas v'chalila which would happen in the future. So that's how we're dealing with it. But this shook the community. This absolutely shook the community. And I was discussing this with somebody who writes to me, a very special elderly lady who lives in Canada. And she is somebody who is a person who's very strong in emunah, in Hashem. And she said to me, she's having difficulty in dealing with this. It's shaking a little bit her faith in Hashem. So I said to her, off the top of my head, I just remembered the words that were said by the father of these 7 children, and he himself said that my children were kadoshim, they were taken as korbanot, and he is displaying the most unbelievable faith in Hashem, that nobody should ever be tested in such a way that he's been tested, but yet he's come out of this with full faith in Hashem. So I said to this lady, I said, who are we to question Hashem's ways? We've got no idea what Hashem's ways are. This is perfect proof, because there's just no sense. But yet the person who was closest to the tragedy, he himself is showing such unbelievable emunah and bitachon in Hashem after something like this, and he can still hold his head high and talk about Hashem in positive terms. I can't think of a person who I can describe more as a gibor, as a mighty person, as this man. It just defies. He's just defying all his pain. He's putting all his pain into and using it to make a solid Kiddush Hashem. Anyone who can see this story and hear this story, the man is radiating Kiddush Hashem under heavy fire. So nothing can stand against the backdrop of such a painful incident. Nobody can turn around and say that there's any credibility to any stupid arguments they've got, any stupid broiguses, anything. No, everything pales into, there's no into insignificance when you think about such a thing, and you think about such a man who really I can't. Just words fail me. I'm not the type of person to speak about this. Bezrat Hashem, I will be going on Thursday to hear these Rabbanim, and perhaps I'll come away with some things maybe I can share with you. I'm sure there's going to be wholesale tears at this thing. There's no question. This is meant to shake us up. It's not a test just for the family. It's a test for everybody who hears about this thing, who's in this generation and hears such a thing. We have to do something. So with all this I mentioned, that's talking about fire. It's a fire of destruction. So I want to turn to this week's parasha, which is Parashat Tzav, and I want to talk about fire that is not destructive. So let's turn to the second pasuk, which is Perek Vav pasuk Beit. That's chapter 6, verse 2. Tzav et Aharon vet banav lemor. Zot Torat haolah, hi haolah al mokada al mizbeach kol halayla ad haboker ve'esh tukad hamizbeach tukad ve'esh hamizbeach tukad bo. We are talking about the fire on the altar, which should be kept alive. It should be kept constant. Now, there's many ways of looking at this pasuk. One, I'm going to talk about a couple of things. The first thing I want to talk about is what the fire represents. The fire, according to one interpretation, is the fire of a person's drive, a person's passion, a person's real motivating force. A person's passion in serving Hashem, it's essential. To serve Hashem in a cold way, or to serve Hashem where we don't really feel, that what we're doing is essential. We feel we're going through the motions. We feel, mitzvah is something that we have to do because our parents did them or because we're forced to do them. And really, we don't want to be doing them. We're a bit scared if we don't do them. And people live by rote. And, you get into this syndrome when people are looking for heterim. They're looking for ways out. That they can find a way to not do something instead of finding ways to do extra things. Now, I'm not talking about people adding on chumrot, adding on stringencies when they don't keep the basic law. I'm saying it's the syndrome that I keep talking about people who are so happy when there's no tachnun. When you go to shul in the morning, and we're in the month of Nisan now, and in the whole month of Nisan, we don't say tachnun. So people are so happy, I can save 10 minutes, I can have 10 minutes more breakfast. Or I can get home and do what I need to do 10 minutes early. Instead of saying, look, I would have been in shul for this amount of time anyway. I've now saved 7, 8 or 10 minutes, however long it is. It could be on a Monday or Thursday, it could be even longer. So now what am I going to do? Go home and waste more time on Twitter or internet or garbage? Or let me stay when I would normally leave shul and let me do something constructive. Let me learn something. Let me teach somebody. Let me go spend 5 minutes speaking to my mother on the phone, or my father on the phone. and giving them some nachat. We all bless each other. You should have nachat from your children. It's very, very important. These days, teenagers don't always give nachat to their parents. It's a big bracha to have nachat from your children, and it should never be underestimated. So what are we doing with that time? You've got to have a passion. Now, that passion is very good. It's very positive. However, there is a risk when a person feels passionate about Hashem, because there's a risk that this passion can burn other people, can harm other people. When a person's passion can be so much, a person can be passionate that they never speak in shul, which is a very good thing. It's terrible to speak in shul. It's one of my pet hates. If I can say I hate anything in life, apart from atheists, militant atheists, militant atheism, not atheists, militant atheism. One thing I dislike intensely is talking in shul. Now, there are two ways of getting people not to talk in shul. One is not to talk in shul yourself. There's one way of being completely ineffective, and that is not practicing what you preach. If you talk in shul, and then somebody else makes a disturbance, and you say, shh, then he is not really going to be affected by your rebuke. Because he may or may not have seen you talking, or even if he hasn't seen you talking, you're not a person that espouses being quiet in shul. Or the other way, first of all, the first way, let me stress, is leading by example. If you don't talk in shul and you make it your mission statement when you walk into that shul, that you concentrate on your tefillah, that's a wonderful thing. That's leading by example. For us, as Sephardim who pray very often in Ashkenazi shuls, it's a much easier task not to talk in shul, because our prayers are longer than the standard Ashkenazi prayer. Our korbanot lasts 15 minutes. Ashkenazi korbanot normally anything between 5 and 10 minutes. The Ashkenazi tefillah, they say Aleinu at the end, after Ashrei and Uvola Sion, they say Aleinu. At that point in the Sephardi prayer, we're just getting started. There's a few prayers there that we've got to finish off. So we're really busy praying in shul. We've got no time to talk. It's when you have the spare time at your fingertips, maybe it's during the Kriyat Torah, that you feel, you know what, I need to talk, I have to schmooze, I see my friend, I've got to catch up, this and that. So one way is to lead by example. The second way is to get up and just say, shh, and any other noise which can emanate from your primal, prehistoric base instinct of making somebody else be quiet. Now, the second way obviously is the wrong way. That's where the fire of passion is translated into a fire that's going to burn other people. That's no good. That never works. I can't imagine a person being told in a really embarrassing way, shush or quiet or, embarrassing in public, that person who's embarrassed becomes a Baal Teshuvah and suddenly realizes, oh, I shouldn't be talking in shul. It might happen, but it's not likely. If you want to do something other than lead by example, approach the fellow outside of shul. First of all, don't tell him off straight away. Speak to him. Hi, how are you? I haven't seen you before. Or if you've seen him before, how are you doing? How's your day, etc. And slip it in. It's amazing. This shul is fantastic. It's so wonderful that there's such decorum in the shul that nobody talks. Do it in an obtuse way, an obscure way, so that he doesn't feel persecuted. There's ways and there's ways of doing it. And if you can't say it politely, you can't say it in a way that's not going to offend him, I would suggest, in my humble opinion, don't say anything. Lead by example and pray for him. Daven to Hashem, please let him see the light, let him realize that it's wrong to talk in shul, and let him concentrate on his prayer. Hashem is waiting for us to pray for our fellow man. So why shouldn't we? So that's the fire of passion, that we should not let that out and hurt people and damage people. And that's also hinted in this pasuk that I just quoted for you, because if you look in the Torah, in that second pasuk, it says the word mokedah ala mizbeach, which is translated as which goeth up in its firewood upon the altar. I'm reading from the ye old Hertz. Is it the Hertz? Yeah, the Hertz Chumash. So it's in 500-year-old English. But the word mokedah is written with a small mem. Why is the mem so small? The mem is so small because the mem shows humility. We had in last week's parsha where the aleph of Vayikra was minimized to show the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu. And this week's parsha, the mem is minimized to show the humility of a person, that if he feels the fire and the passion, he shouldn't let it out. He should keep it and radiate out without hurting and damaging other people. Now, there's another example of this. You know, the famous thing they used to teach us in school about Rabbi Yonatan ben Uziel, one of the great early tzaddikim from the period of the Tanaim, that he used to learn Torah, and birds that flew over his head were scorched by the fire of his Torah. Now, he was the greatest Talmid of Hillel. And they say Hillel was so great, he had a Talmid like this. But only today I saw an amazing observation which I never saw before. If Hillel had a student like Yonatan ben Uziel who burnt birds with his fire of Torah, then surely his teacher should be greater than his Talmid. We don't hear about Hillel burning birds that were flying over his head. We don't hear about anything like that. Why not? So I heard a beautiful explanation that Hillel's fire was within. He didn't let it out. His fire, his passion was concealed within him. And he was like, it would radiate, but it would not be a destructive radiation. It would be a positive. It was almost like Hillel was his own filter. He would be his own barrier, his own, you have fire in a brazier. It contains the fire, that the fire doesn't spurt out or lash out. So he was his own brazier, controlling the fire within him. And I'll tell you a story. Baruch Hashem, the first of a few stories I want to share with you today. So keep listening. About Rav Dessler, the author of Michtav Meliyahu, who lived in our very own shores of the United Kingdom. The story was told that in his house there was found a can of air freshener. Now, anyone who knows anything about Rav Dessler would know that this might have been a very strange thing. You can't imagine Rav Dessler pottering around his house, spraying and making his living room, lavender fresh, or smelling of potpourri or roses or whatever. It didn't seem like his type of thing. So when his Talmidim came to his house and they saw this can of air freshener on the side, they questioned him about it, but he gave some obscure reply that sort of sidestepped what it was for, and nobody asked any further. However, when Rav Dessler's Rebbetzin passed away, I think it was either at the Shiva or a couple of weeks later, the true story came out. Because in the Dessler household, they had a laundryman who would come every week to collect the dirty laundry. And the laundryman was Jewish. And the Rebbetzin, I think he was Jewish. Maybe he wasn't Jewish, I'm not sure actually, now that I think about it. But the Rebbetzin was so careful not to cause any distress to anybody that she bought this can of air freshener and she sprayed all the clothes before she gave it to the laundryman so she wouldn't cause him distress having to smell like soiled, like dirty clothing. Yeah, how much pain does one experience when you have a bunch of dirty laundry and you're taking it? If you're a laundryman, that's your job. You become desensitized to it. Like dustmen, they become desensitized to all the horrible smells. But that's from their point of view. From Rebbetzin Dessler's point of view, she had such sensitivity to her fellow human being, she didn't want to cause them even that amount of distress. That is heightened level of sensitivity. Perhaps we're not at that level, but it doesn't mean we can't aspire to it. It doesn't mean it can't give us chizuk to show that we, at least we don't treat our fellow man with disdain. Okay, we don't have these heightened measures, but you can see they're setting the bar very high, and we must aspire to these levels. Now, talking about passion and the need for passion, genuine passion in Judaism, which a lot of the time is very lacking in modern society, because we are as I mentioned, we're the generation that always wants to find loopholes and try and get out of things, and anything other than worshipping Hashem. I get out of this share, I get out of this mitzvah, and kula after kula after kula. Instead of, if there is a leniency, we should be happy to have the leniency, but we should be sad. We should say, okay, now we have a leniency. Let me find other ways of utilizing my energies and my resources to serve Hashem better. So, let me tell you a story about the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim was once at a certain place, and he went to the mikveh. And it happened that the mikveh was freezing cold. So he asked the balan, the person who's in charge of the mikveh, how come it's cold? He said, whatever, they didn't manage to put the hot water in there to heat it up. So the Chofetz Chaim went and he found there was a pot that had been on the stove, and it wasn't on the fire, but it'd come off the fire. So he thought, okay, I'll take this and I'll pour it into the mikveh to make the mikveh hotter. So he poured it in, and he put his foot in, and it was lukewarm at most. So he thought to himself, look, I just poured the pot that had been boiling on the stove, and now I took it off. And then he said to himself, no, that's not going to make the mikveh hot. If you want the mikveh hot, you have to pour water which is absolutely boiling. So much so it's almost unbearably hot. And when you pour that onto the cold water, that will make it warm, properly warm, not lukewarm. That will give it a good temperature. Says the Chofetz Chaim, the generation, he was speaking about his generation. The Chofetz Chaim died in 1933. So he lived in the late 1800s. So he was talking about his generation. He said there are so many Jews out there that they've lost their passion for Judaism, and their lives are cold, and they're living so far from Torah. How do we heat them up? We have to be boiling hot ourselves. We have to heat them up with the fire of our Yiddishkeit. Not that's going to, we're not going to go and shout and scream at them. That's not going to be makar of people. Yeah, like I used to go to a shul in Israel, and there was always one person there who was a Kana'i, who was like very zealous. That whenever somebody would make a mistake in the davening or the prayer, he would scream at the top of his lungs, no, like this. Now, of course, we have to correct. We're not supposed to let mistakes go, but he would stand up and scream and make a whole big public display. That's not what the Chofetz Chaim is talking about. The Chofetz Chaim is talking about an inner passion that's so boiling hot that we radiate outwards, and it will soften and melt the coldest hearts and bring them back to Hashem. Now, let's look forward to the next pasuk, pasuk Gimel, pasuk 3. V'lavash HaKohen mido vad umechnasei vad yilbash al basaro v'hirim et hadeshen asher tochal ha'esh et ha'olah al ha'mizbeach v'samo eitzel ha'mizbeach. Now, this verse is talking about a very curious procedure that was done on a daily basis on the Mizbeach. That the previous night's ashes, because there was always sacrifices burnt on the altar. So the ashes that were left over from the previous night were taken off, and the new korbanot were burnt on the altar. Now what would they do with these ashes? They would put them at the side. And they would bring the new offerings. So it would be a process of removing the old and bringing in the new. They say, there's a phrase, wring out the old, bring in the new, something like that. I can't remember exactly how it goes. And I heard an interesting thought about this. What is this about? We have to take off the old. So, an interesting explanation is that a person sometimes finds that he plateaus. He's at a certain level, that he's attained distinction and greatness in a certain field in Judaism. He feels now he's really accomplished. Now, a person could be excused in other disciplines and other fields of other disciplines in life, that he's achieved all that he needs to achieve and he can go no further. A person can be an accomplished doctor. A person can be an accomplished lawyer. That has a finite level. When it comes to Judaism, when it comes to Torah, there is no limit. It is, by definition, infinite. It is limitless. So when a person gets to a certain level and he feels, look what I've achieved. I'm a Rosh Hashiva now. I am now the head of this chesed organization. And people look up to me. So now I'm at my level. And he feels that that's it. Well, that's no good. A person has to take that accomplishment. If he's reached a certain level, take it out, put it to the side, and start again. There was that story, the true story that I mentioned, I think a number of years ago, about the Jewish doctor who discovered a drug called L-Dopa that would be a drug for seemingly incurable patients who had chronic frozen syndrome, where they wouldn't be able to move at all. He administered this drug, and they would become mobile again. But the problem was, it wasn't long lasting, and the patients, after a while, started to deteriorate. It's a famous story. And at the end, ultimately the drug had to be dismissed. So what did he do? Once his drug had now, been classed as ineffective, he went straight back to the drawing board, this brave Jewish doctor, and he said, let's start again. And he renewed his efforts. He didn't say, right, I tried, okay, I failed, I did what I could. He went right back to the drawing board. That's what a Jew has to do. A Jew has to take his accomplishments and not rest on his laurels. He has to put it aside and say, where can I start now? Where can I begin again? There was another story of a great rabbi who he was in his early 90s, I believe. And what did he do? I think the story goes he opened up a kindergarten. A kindergarten for children 3, 4, 5 years old. At the age when he's in his 90s. Who could imagine such a thing? But he said, what am I going to do? Retire? I need to do something. I need to serve my Creator. Now, if there's a 90-year-old man who can do such a thing, who are we to turn around and say, I've done it all and I'm going to retire and play golf? That's not what we're all about. We need to renew our efforts. We need to keep that fire burning and pulsating and radiating. And there was a similar story told about Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz used to have his Gemara was literally almost black. He would write notes all over his Gemara. When he would finish a Masechta and he would want to learn the Masechta again, he would buy a new Gemara. Not because he'd used up all the white space in the columns, because he said to himself, look, I already had these insights, my novel ideas, my own observations on the Gemara, but that was then. I've done that already. Now it's time to move on. I don't want to live in knowledge that I don't live in yesterday's knowledge. I want new knowledge. So he'd buy a new, fresh Gemara. He started from the beginning. He would renew himself. This is what we have to do. We can't say, I had a great Chiddush, fantastic, and that's it. We've got to move on and push and push and push. Now we just mentioned about the Trumat HaDeshen, the offering of the ashes. Did you know that on Yom Kippur, the first thing the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, did on this holy day of Yom Kippur, he would don ordinary garments of an ordinary Kohen, because the Kohen Gadol wore 8 garments normally when serving. He would don ordinary clothes and come and take the ashes off the altar. Now, if you think about it, this is very strange. This is the holiest day of the year. And the Kohen Gadol is doing what no other human being in his generation ever did. He went into the Holy of Holies on the holiest day of the year, being the holiest person. And the first thing he did before anything, put on his regular clothes and start scooping up the garbage. What type of thing is this to do to a Kohen Gadol? Listen to this explanation. It should affect all of us at any stage of our lives. The Kohen Gadol, as we just mentioned, was the holiest person, and this was the holiest day, and he was due to do the holiest work. Now, he could not be excused for at least feeling a little bit sense of pride, that he was the man who was taking all the prayers, all the hopes of all the people, and it was all resting on him. And he could be excused maybe for feeling a little bit in the clouds. So Hashem says, before you do any of that, I want you to do something very ordinary. I want you to feel that you're scooping out the ashes, a seemingly menial task, because your head should not be in the clouds. You have to empathize with the regular person. Nobody else is on that level that you're at. It doesn't mean you can't feel for your fellow man. So this was to, in a way, not keep him on that perch, so he would feel aloof from everybody. He needed to feel connected on this holiest day to every single Jew, whatever their station in life and whatever their stage in life. Tremendous lesson for all of us. Let's move now to the next Perek, that's Perek Zayin, Perek 7, and let's turn to Pasuk Yud Zayin, verse 17. V'hanotar mibisar hazevach bayom hashlishi ba'esh isaref. What happens when there is a leftover of a sacrifice? Now, the leftover of the sacrifice cannot be eaten the next day. You have to burn it. Notar is what it's called. That's called the leftover, from the word motar, which means something which is extra, something which is left over. So why would we burn over the leftovers of a sacrifice? So the answer is, it would show that a person has to have faith in Hashem, not to store over the bracha that God gave him on any one specific day, A person has to have faith in Hashem, that what Hashem gives me for today, that's all I need. I don't need to be obsessed with saving over for the next day. Because I have to have faith that Hashem will give me on the next day what I need from Hashem on the next day. Now, I need to make a point very, very clear right here, and that is, this is not talking about a person should not have any savings in the bank and say, when it comes to his daughter's wedding, no, Hashem will provide a miracle and give me all the money. No. A person has to have an eye on the future. Of course, a person has to save. A person has to have to be careful about the future. But a person should not be obsessed by worrying about the future. And it's implicit in my words, to worry about the future. A person must not worry and say, I have to save over, I'm so worried. You have faith in Hashem. He's not going to let you down. A person must be concerned, but to make this an obsession that takes away from your emunah and bitachon in Hashem, that we do not do. That's called an obsession. Now I'll tell you a story. In fact, this is a mashal from Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein, who I quote very often. He gives the following analogy. There was once a king. Naturally, as I said, most stories, mashalim, are about kings. So there was a king who was a very benevolent ruler, and he loved his people. And he wanted to find ways of benefiting them. So the king devised a plan. He wanted to give a little test for his people. What did he do? He said to them, I have a treasure chest full of diamonds and jewels and everything. And it's in a very ornate box. And I'm going to put it somewhere. And I want the person who managed to retrieve this chest is going to be able to keep the treasure. Now, the people came to the spot where the king said, and they saw there was a river there, and there was a tree overlooking the river. So they looked around, where was the treasure chest? They saw in the river, they saw the treasure chest there. So they were thinking, how would they get the treasure chest? So they would see exactly where it is. Now it looked like it was sunk down at a certain point in the river. Many people came and they said, look, the king is desperate for us to get this treasure. We have to find, and we know the king loves us, we have to go and find this treasure. So some of them went and they jumped down, they dived down, they were groping, trying to get the treasure chest. They couldn't hold it. Some people went and they put fishing lines and they tried to scoop it up. And whatever they did, they saw the treasure chest was still there, it was unmoved. And people tried and tried and tried. In the end, people were just about to give up. And there was one fellow who waited patiently till everybody had tried all their tricks and whatever. And he decided to ask the king one question. He said to the king, Your Majesty, when you asked us to get the treasure chest, did it entail for us to get wet? Or did it entail for us to stay dry? So the king realized this person is very close to the answer. He said, no, I don't necessarily demand that you get wet to get this treasure. So the man said, aha, thank you, Your Majesty. What did the fellow do? He climbed up into the tree, and it wasn't longer than a few minutes later that he came down from the tree clutching the treasure chest, to the amazement of all the onlookers. And the king showed a smile, and he realized that this man had the answer. What was the answer? That the treasure chest was not in the river. It was in the trees. What people were looking at in the river was the reflection of the treasure. They were groping at dimyonot, at imaginations. That really, the real treasure was up above. Says Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein. He says, this is what a person has to realize when he attempts to have faith in Hashem. That the things which we hold dear in this world, the material things, they're transitory. They're like reflections in the water. Where is the real treasure? Where is our real focus? We have to turn our eyes klape ma'ala, upwards. Turn our eyes towards heaven. That's where the real treasure lies. If we look at this world as a repository of money and iPods and internet and garbage and all this stuff that we get obsessed with, and they take us up so much of our time on this frivolous nonsense stuff, which I'm not saying you should give it up completely. We're not malachim, but at least use it sparingly. At least when you have to live in the material world, which we have to. We're that's what we're not living like angels, but at least use those objects. Use them sparingly. Step away from the computer when you don't need it. Put your phone back in your pocket when you don't need it. If you want to put your hand in your pocket, pull out a Mishnah. Pull out one of these pocket L'Chofetz Chaim books. A daily lesson. It fits right in your pocket. Pull that out. Don't pull out your phone every 5 minutes and get obsessed by it. Do things sparingly. Realize the real treasure is up above. The real treasure is the Torah and the mitzvot. And all these things that will get us into Olam Haba. And there's another story I'm going to tell you. And now we move on from mashal into true story again. So I remember when this incident happened. I don't remember the story related to the incident, but I remember this story, the event that surrounds this story. In 2003, when my family and myself were living in Ramat Beit Shemesh, there was a coach that went from Beit Shemesh to Bnei Brak, and unfortunately the coach, I think it was going over a bridge, and it fell over and it crashed, and there was a terrible tragedy. Many people killed on that coach. It was terrible. It was devastating. And the story goes that there was an Avreich who was living in, at least learning, if not living in Beit Shemesh, and he wanted to visit his parents who lived in Bnei Brak. And he wanted to get the coach. So he had 13 shekels in his pocket. He wanted to buy maybe a kartisiya or a return ticket. So he went on, was queuing up, was online or in line to buy the ticket at the bus stop, and he put his hand into his pocket to pull out the 13 shekels, and he put his hand. He only found 3 shekels. He's like, oh, what is, where's the 10 shekels? He's feeling around, he couldn't find it. Now, he could have turned around and asked anybody, can you lend me 10 shekels? I'll pay you back. He probably knew loads of people. He said no. He had already taken on a resolution that he would not borrow money from people unless he knew he could pay it back. Now, 10 shekels is about £1.50. That's maybe $2.50, something like that. It's a very small amount of money, whatever currency you think of it in. He didn't want to borrow even a small amount of money. He stepped away from the coach, and that was the coach that crashed. Now, what happened? He actually got a ride from somebody else, and they followed the coach. Apparently, they were driving behind the coach, and he was in the car, and he actually saw the coach crash in front of his very eyes. And this fellow was beyond himself when he saw, because I'm sure he knew people on that coach. So he burst out into tears. He couldn't take it to see such a thing unfold before his very eyes, that could have been him, and that terrible tragedy, people dying. So he had a handkerchief in his pocket. He took out the handkerchief to dry his eyes, and what was in the handkerchief was the 10 shekel note that he should have paid the driver. Who knows what miracles Hashem is making for us on a daily basis. This is one example where the truth came out for all to see. But who says Hashem isn't making miracles for us that we don't see, that we never see? Maybe we have to get, after 120 years, to Shemayim to see the miracles that Hashem wrought for us on a daily basis. We must never take life for granted. Never. Lives are meant to be cherished. Lives are not meant to be abused. Fire is meant to be inside us. Fire must not consume. Fire has to be used to radiate warmth. Lives are meant to be cherished. And I'm going to give you one last point, and I'm going to end off with a story. So if we move to the next Perek Chet, Pasuk Bet, that's chapter 8, verse 2. Kach et Aaron vet banav ito vet habgadim vet shemer hamishcha vet parach hatat vet shnei ha'ilim vet sal hamatzot. This is talking about the command, take Aaron and his sons with him. Hashem is commanding Moshe Rabbeinu and telling him, take Aaron. What do you mean take Aaron? You have a command to take Aaron? Rashi tells us something interesting. Aaron felt he was not worthy of doing avodah for Hashem, of serving Hashem, because Aaron was racked with guilt, because he had a part, at least in his own mind, he felt he had a part in the worshipping of the golden calf, because he was the one who tried the delaying tactic. He didn't tackle the sinners in the episode of the golden calf head on, because already Hur was killed. When he tried to tackle him head on, Aaron tried delaying tactics. But at the end of the day, Aaron felt that he was responsible in whatever way, whatever small way, he felt responsible. He felt in a way ashamed to be considered even to serve Hashem. Says Rashi, Mashchehu b'dvarim. Moses was given a command. To be Moses' own name was Mashisi Minamayim. The name Moshe comes from Mishisihu, Ki Minamayim Mishisihu. He was drawn out of the water. So God said to Moses, draw Aaron towards you, but dvarim, with words. Make him feel that you don't have any culpability for that sin. You tried your best. Don't feel bad. But don't go and tell him off. Don't go do it in a negative way. Draw him close to you with words. There are ways of influencing people, and there are ways of influencing people. One way is effective, one way is ineffective. Words should come from warmth, from that inner fire within you should come the warmth of your words. That's how you draw people in. Don't use words to bite people, to throw at people. So now I'll tell you, this is the final story for tonight. And this is a story told about a rabbi called Rav Alexander Ziselchinsky, who was reputably an incredible machanech, an incredible teacher. And there's stories told of him that in Rav Chinsky's class, there was a certain boy whose name was Herschel. And Herschel was a very mischievous boy. Anyone who's been teaching for any length of time there's always at least one boy who's a little bit more labedic, a little bit more lively than the other boys. And that boy is the teacher's particular challenge. It's not a challenge to sit in a class where all the children are well behaved and they stand up when they need to stand up, they sit down when they need to sit down, they say over their Pesukim, they learn their Gemara, everything goes nice and smooth. That's no challenge. The challenge is the one child who's playing up. Now, I suppose in our modern terminology, we might describe this young boy Herschel as being ADD or something close to that. It was like a live wire. And time after time, he would test his teacher, Rabbi Chinsky, by playing up and chanting in front of the class and doing things which are not necessarily appropriate behavior. And Rav Chinsky was very mild, and he would censure the young boy, but he would do it in a very mild way. But it wasn't effective. And one day, this young boy Herschel went over the top. So Rav Chinsky said to Herschel, "Take off your glasses." So Herschel took off his glasses, and as soon as he took off his glasses, Herschel put his hand in front of his face because he thought that his Rebbe was going to hit him. And his Rebbe lifted up his hand as if to hit the child, and of course he stopped. He would never dream of hitting that child. And he said, "Open your eyes, look at me." So Herschel looked at his Rebbe. He said, "You know, I would never hit you, but you deserve to be hit. You deserve to be punished. But you know, if I hit you, God forbid, I would go down in history as the Rebbe who hit the Gadol Hador." So Herschel is looking, "What do you mean Gadol Hador? I'm not the leader of a generation." The Rebbe said to him, "You have the capability of being one of the greatest people in your whole generation. And I know that you've got it within you." Because obviously this boy Herschel must have been a tremendous student, but his behavior let him down. The Rebbe said, "Can you imagine if, God forbid, I hit you? Not that I would ever do such a thing. And then they would tell me, 'You hit the Gadol Hador.' I wouldn't be able to leave my house. I would feel such shame. That's why I would never do such a thing anyway. I would definitely never do it to you." So Herschel realized what his Rebbe was saying, and he was crying, and he wanted to do teshuvah. And indeed, this Herschel, because of the non-slap that he got, because of the tochacha he got from his Rebbe not hurting him or rebuking him in such a way, he did teshuvah, and he indeed became a great Rosh Yeshiva. And he never forgot this lesson. His Rebbe taught him by using the opposite of violence, the opposite of tochacha. And although this story might, we think of hitting children, God forbid, lo aleinu, nobody will ever do such a thing nowadays. But to see the lesson from not doing it to a child is a tremendous lesson that stayed with this boy for the rest of his life. Yeh Ratzon, all of us should always see simcha, and we should never ever see such a tragedy, nothing even close to that tragedy. That we should see Mashiach Tzidkenu, who will bring with us those 7 malachim, those 7 holy children to us, will bring them back to their father, and they will join in being a part of the experience of being in the Beit Shlishi with Mashiach Tzidkenu and the Avot and Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron and every single tzaddik, every single Jew from the beginning of time till the times of Mashiach. We should see that quickly without any Jew suffering any pain. V'chein yiratzon v'amar Amen. Chag kasher v'sameach.